Hello. When I checked the sound on yesterday's video, I noticed I made a mistake. I referred to the fourth stage of samadhi as anapana samadhi, which is of course incorrect. Anapana is mindfulness of the breath, a type of meditation using the breath as your meditation object. It's a similar sounding word. The fourth stage of samadhi is apana samadhi. I said anapana twice, and the third time I said apana samadhi. So those four stages are kanika samadhi, parikama samadhi, upachara samadhi, and apana samadhi in the Pali language. For my own purposes, I refer to them as coming home, settling, relaxing, and absorption. Just that. And I find that one doesn't really need to know these terms, these labels, other than when we're having this kind of discussion. Because of course in practice, meditation is like driving, excuse me, or swimming, or riding a bicycle. You don't, maybe at first you might say mirror, signal, maneuver when you're learning to drive. But as you continue to develop your driving skills, you just drive and you get from A to B. You don't need to say, I am now in third gear and I'm going to change into fourth gear. This isn't necessary. And similarly, when one is learning to swim, there are no textbooks. There are no theoretical, intellectual ideas on the mythology behind swimming. One simply jumps in at the deep end. And this is the same as meditation. You cannot learn it in a book. So to some extent, these labels are a distraction. And so much focus gets put onto then beyond these four stages of samadhi towards the jhanas, and well, you're then creating additional desire, a need for becoming, a need for achieving, an attachment to an idea. And this whole practice is about letting go. And that is what I want to talk about today, letting go. And a little bit also about rebirth. So, if we start with rebirth, what is that? Well, it's been discussed in many talks, books. The principle of rebirth in Buddhism is not to be confused with reincarnation, or let's say in some of the Western traditional faiths, let's say going to heaven or going to hell, as you are, this person, this personality. Or this same person, this same personality being reincarnated in another body to carry on as that same person. No. It's easy to confuse the two, but rebirth simply is happening every moment. Now, let's think of life happening in moments for the time being, And as you pass from one moment to another, you've left the previous moment behind and gone into the next moment. The causes and conditions you create in the present moment will very much determine what happens in the next moment. You could say that in hours or in days or in weeks or months, or down to seconds and milliseconds. It doesn't matter, because we're assuming moments are like a hand on a clock ticking, tick, 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 like this. But moments aren't like that. Moments are like a sweeping hand that just sweeps around the clock, delineating the 60 seconds, but not tick, 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 sweeping around. And this is the principle of flow. Our moments flow one into another, taking our created karma, our actions of body, speech and mind, with our conscious awareness, let's call it our mind, if you like, into the moments as we move along through time. Time is not a thing, it is a perception of these moments passing by, and we use conventional calendars, clocks, or the rising of the sun or the moon to try and determine the length of time we have been doing something, or the length of time until we're going to do something again, for conventionality's sake. But we're trying to let go of all this and be in the present moment, but not forsaking our responsibility for what we have done in the past or what we're going to do in the future, but letting go of our attachment to it. So, for example, if you spend this moment considering how bad the last moment was and projecting into the next moment your aversion to it being as bad as the last moment, then you are not going to enjoy this moment. Similarly, if you have experienced the previous moment as all peace and love, joy and happiness, and full of wonder, and you are hoping that the next moment will be similarly as enjoyable, then it is much the same that you will not be present and enjoying this current moment. And this is why our practice of meditation is about bringing our awareness, our conscious awareness, our mind into this present moment to experience the here and now, which is in fact all we have. The past being just memory, which is unreliable, and the future being imagination. So that's all well and good, but what is the point of even knowing that? And how does that fit in with rebirth? Well, in terms of rebirth, whether you want to understand it or not, it doesn't matter. Believe it or not, it doesn't matter. If, firstly, the principle, and this can apply to any belief system as well as any non-belief system. So, theistic with a god, or atheistic without a god. A system like Buddhism, which has no god, but has a principle, a path, a guide for how to live our lives in order to become content and therefore happy, whether in this life or the next or not, we already know whatever we do in this life, if we do good, it will result in good things for ourselves. Bad, it will result in bad things for ourselves. You may get away with doing something bad, rob a bank and have a lot of money, but you won't be happy. You'll always be looking over your shoulder, worrying. But if you do good things, you feel good, and other people you help feel good also. So we already know that, and this is sila, this is keeping moral virtue. So as long as you do that, you can't lose. If there is nothing after this physical body dies, then you've still had a good life, and you've harmed not either yourself or anyone else. But if you spend this life heedlessly harming others and yourself, then whether there is an afterlife or not, you still haven't enjoyed this life to the maximum. And if there is a heaven or a hell, you're going to go to the wrong place. So you can't lose either way if you're keeping moral virtue. And the same can be said for the opposite. You cannot win by leading a heedless, unwholesome life. The only way to be happy is to develop wholesome mind states and reduce our unwholesome mind states. So when this physical body dies, when we actually come to the end of our life, this happens in a moment. And whatever we are attached to, still clinging on to at that time, is what flows. Not this personality, not this name, not this sex, not this particular career or nationality, creed or colour. Just our actions of body, speech and mind, and our awareness, our knowing of our physical feelings and our emotional states. This is what passes from moment to moment, and at the point of death of this physical body, if it is still clinging, attached to sensual desire, or the reverse, the opposite, aversion, ill will, if it is still clinging to the idea of this personality, if it is still clinging to life, it's reborn. It is rebirth, we call it, in another being. And this can be either in the human realm, animal realm, the lower realms and hell realms, or the higher realms or heavenly realms. But whether you choose to understand that, and this is something that can only be understood experientially by developing recall of previous lives, when you cannot argue that that is what happens with yourself, you cannot argue. Or if you choose, well, I don't understand that or believe that's what happens, even in this lifetime, what one day does today will affect what happens tomorrow. And we also have rebirth in the sense of how we are affected by our causes and conditions, sometimes voluntarily, sometimes involuntarily, which can have an enormous effect on our lives. One day you can be married with children, the next day you can be divorced and, say, living alone. One day you can be the chairman of a company, the next day you can be unemployed and on some social benefits. This happens. And in those circumstances, when you change, it's likely that other people's perception of you and your perception of yourself, that personality view, in the Pali word they call it Sakkaya Ditthi, is likewise to change also. You may feel better having been made redundant or given the sack from that job as the chairman, or you may feel worse, but you will feel like a different person. As a living alone person, no longer a family man in a marriage, you will feel different, maybe better, maybe worse. Are you the same person? Have you been reborn as the same person in that new life, in that new existence, in that new set of causes and conditions? No. You're still aware of the situation, you know you're happy about it, or you know you're sad about it. You know you're angry about it. Or you might not care about it at all, and you know that. But what knows that hasn't changed. What knew you were the chairman of the company before you were in the Social Security office asking for some money, knew whether you were at the board meeting, sitting in the boardroom at a nice table, and equally knows you're sitting in a government office waiting for them to give you some money. That which knows is the same. But your perception of yourself and other people's perception of yourself has changed dramatically in that example. But the moments have just flowed, even though there's been a radical change. And what knows has also just flowed. So, the first stage of enlightenment requires, and that's actually not what I'm going to talk about, but I've gone on to that now, is the letting go, if you like, abandonment of this Sakkaya Ditthi, this personality view, this ego, and knowing that all you are is what knows. So that also ties in, like all of these Buddhist lists, numbered lists, with what I was going to talk about, what I am going to talk about, which is, if I can remember, the fetters. That's it. My mind went blank. You see, you're not hearing all that I'm hearing in the forest. So I'm talking to you, and wherever you're sitting, you are sitting there as a result of your causes and conditions. You might be on the bus, or listening to this on the train, or sitting comfortably at home. Now, my circumstances, which are I've got here in the end, and to some extent by my own volition, and these causes and conditions that I'm surrounded by are very different to that I was surrounded by, say, 15 years ago. But what knows I was there and knows I'm here is the same. And similarly, if you were talking to me on the phone now or then, I probably sound the same, look a bit older, quite a lot older. and to some extent you'll see similar personality traits. But what I'm holding on to is very different. What I'm clinging to, what I consider important in this life, and looking ahead into future lives, is very different. My vehicle, my house, and all of the things through this process of renunciation I've given up to begin with, I have given up, let go of. That is just a physical and materialistic side of renunciation or letting go. That's really, it sounds difficult, but that's the easy part. And that isn't the necessary part. As lay people, you don't have to give up your house, your clothes, your hair, your name, your vehicle, your family. You can keep all of those things and still practice sila, samadhi, panya. You can still become enlightened. You can still become an arahant or even a Buddha. But if you want to go the fast track, then one way to get there, well, to get to the beginning of the track only, is to just let go of everything, hence the house, the cars, the jobs, the money, the vehicles, the family, and become a monk or a nun. Because that physical renunciation of giving up, leaving everything behind you, really does clear the space, clear the way to fully apply yourself to the practice of letting go, and assists materially with the dropping of that ego, that personality. But it is far from gone or even scratched the surface. In fact, in effect, when you do this and you first enter a monastery, your ego, your personality view, your conceit increases, I should say. It's a kind of defensive reaction. The humility one has to develop in living with other people in community, in being answerable when you haven't been in a former life, answerable to your superiors. They could be someone younger than your children, a monk of more vasas, more years in the robes than yourself, but even considerably younger than your children, for instance, telling you how to sweep a floor, telling you how to wash your bowl. And this you accept as part of the practice. But of course, as lay people, you don't need to do that. You can still, however, develop this wisdom, this understanding of these fetters. So let me try and get back on track and to the point with regards to these fetters, which is when I'm talking about rebirth and letting go. The letting go is very much about what is tying us to being reborn. And fetters just means tying, ties. So we are tied to our lives when we are, say, working, have a family, everything that's in our lives, we are to some extent tied to that. And we don't want to cut those ties. Now, one way you can do that is become a monk, and you have to cut those ties of those material parts of your life. But your mind, your emotional side, has not cut those ties. You're being pulled back. So you are chained, if you like, to that life. How you were born. You were born, and you were born into this life. You grew up, you got older, you were educated, and you became a whatever job you have. And you're doing this job for some years, and this is you. What you consider you, and what other people perceive as you also. And you can continue like that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want liberation, that means freedom, then one has to free yourselves from these ties, free yourselves from these fetters, these chains. Detach yourself from that ball and chain of rebirth. Because you're staying in that cycle of promotion and working hard, and then wanting the next promotion and working harder because you've got a more important job, and so on. And similarly, from life to life, with that attachment, you're reborn into it, to be born, grow old, get sick, and die again. And you may enjoy that and say, well, this is great, I don't mind. If I can be reborn again and have the life I've had, then I'd do it all over again. But this is memory, which is unreliable. Do you want to be actually physically born again? You can't remember that, for sure, but it is not a good experience. Do you want to have to learn to go to the toilet properly, learn how to eat properly, learn how to walk, talk? Do you want to have that first day at school again, away from your mother? Do you want to then have to pass exams, go to college, university, or go to work? Do you want that first relationship and then that first relationship breakdown? Do you want that illness you had and the illnesses you will have again? And you haven't experienced the process of aging yet. Do you want to go through that again? And then ultimately the pain of death again? As nice as it may seem, with the nice job and the nice cars and the nice house and the nice relationship, it comes at a high cost. And liberation and freedom from that is just that, liberation and freedom from that, letting go of your understanding that that is what you are, and freeing that which knows, your citta, your conscious awareness, from future rebirth. And this is what we call the attainment of arahantship and ultimately nibbana. So these aspects, if I just go through the list of the fetters of what tie us and what make us be reborn, they are similarly applicable to moment during your day. So it is useful to know, because you can make adjustments in your daily life to be less attached to things, so that when they do or are inevitably lost, do inevitably break, everything will let you down ultimately. If not, you will die and have no access to them anymore. So your loved ones, for instance, they won't be around forever. And similarly, if you were to die before them, they will experience you not being around forever. And if we want to be less affected, more equanimous by those events, then we have to practice this aspect or this principle, or understand what letting go really is. So when we there's 10 fetters. Ego. I don't think I'll read I don't know the I don't know the Pali names for them. I've got them written down in front of me so I don't forget one or two, because there's 10. The lists seem to be getting longer, don't they? Now, the Buddha really only taught two things. There's suffering and a cause of suffering. No, sorry, there's suffering and an end of suffering. And then there's the Four Noble Truths of suffering, cause of suffering, end of suffering, and path leading to the end of suffering. And whilst I'm about it, I might as well go on to say what that path is, because this is always applicable to everything we're talking about. I should say it at the start of every talk, that this Noble Eightfold Path is right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right meditation. which can be summed up in just 3 parts: sila, moral virtue; samadhi, meditation; and panya, the development of the mind, wisdom. Not intellectual knowledge, wisdom. The development of wholesome mind states and the reduction of unwholesome mind states. This is a very important thing that you should not only know, it's not something to recite, it's something you should understand and feel. So when you stray a little off this Noble Eightfold Path, just a little bit, you can gently tap yourself back onto the path. And then when you slide along that way a little bit, just gently tap yourself back onto the path. And all of the answers to all of your questions are there, right there, in those words of the Buddha, in those teachings. And if you're not a religious person, it's common sense. And if it isn't, try it. It's experiential wisdom, not theoretical wisdom. You can experience it for yourself, right here, right now, today. The next decision you make, apply it to this Noble Eightfold Path. And absolutely apply it strictly. If you want to go this way or that way, and the Noble Eightfold Path says go that way, go that way. Even if you think you could go that way, it would be better. No, go the Noble Eightfold Path way. So if to say something to someone you want to say is not right speech, don't say it. If I won't go through them all. Just try it, and you experientially for yourself will see that immediately it may not seem like you've got a result, but very quickly you'll see, oh, there is no other way, really. So these 10, the first is ego. We've just spoken about this. When we realize that we're just, our personalities are really just our what is a result of causes and conditions that surround us. I mean, I am currently now this monk, but I didn't used to be. And when I was what I used to be, no one would have ever believed that I would be a monk, and perhaps vice versa. And you've all had similar experiences. The second is doubt. Now, doubt is also, it's one of the hindrances in meditations. But doubt, there's another list of 5. Doubt is in really this Noble Eightfold Path and these 4 Noble Truths. If we just say it's that for now, if you doubt that, then you need to look at it, try it out, and experience it for yourself, and this gets rid of doubt. Rites and rituals is number 3. Now this is thinking that if you pray, everything will be okay. It's like superstition. This has to be let go of. Now why do these 3 things tie you to rebirth? Doubt, because you still have this unanswered question. It's kind of a little bit like ignorance. It's a little bit like just not understanding. And ego, you have this attachment, and rites and rituals, it's blind faith. It's belief without substantial proof behind it. Well, there may be coincidences, there may even be proof to some extent, good examples of prayer achieving results. But nothing compares to the absolute unequivocal proof of all actions of body, speech and mind affect that moment and thereafter without a shadow of a doubt, in real terms. It's nothing that has to be believed. Only when you're taking it outside of this life experience into going to heaven or hell, which cannot be, well, some might say it's been proven, in which case this is fine. But you haven't experienced it yourself yet to see the results of what you're doing. So this is something that is considered a fetter. Then the next two are really desire. So sensual desire and ill will. Now, I kind of say they're both desire, because not wanting something, aversion, is the desire not to have, and wanting something, sensual desire, is the desire to have. Now, of course, this is also tying you to rebirth. And when I say rebirth, think of it into the next moment. So if you're having a cup of coffee and you're really enjoying this cup of coffee, then you're going to continue to want it in the next moment. If suddenly you really get fed up with drinking this coffee, you're going to develop aversion to it and you're not going to want it in the next moment. But that doesn't mean that you've let go of it, because you still will think about it in the next moment, about not liking it anymore. Oh no, I wish I hadn't drunk so much coffee, I don't want that in anymore. But if you simply in this moment put that cup of coffee down, whether you're enjoying it or not, because you know wisely, you know through experience, that if you drink any more, it'll be too much and you've had enough, but you just put it down, this is letting go. Literally, you put it down and let go of the cup, that's let go. So that's those two. Then there's the ties of belief, which are in rebirth materialistically and immaterially. So rebirth in heaven and hell, or heaven or hell, but as yourself, not as a result of your attachment to those former 5 things. So that's 6 and 7. Now, conceit is all built into ego and personality view to some extent, and is number 8, but conceit can be positive or negative. I am better than someone else, I am so much better than you. I am worse than someone else, I am so much worse than you, or they are so much better than me. So it has negative and positive connotations also. Restlessness and worry or restlessness, and these do kind of match with the hindrances that come up in meditation, which is really for another talk, but restlessness is really thinking into the future, or even to some extent remembering the past and applying it to the future. So taking this moment now, and rather than enjoying or understanding this moment we have now, comparing it to the past, and then having made a judgment as to whether it's better than the past or worse than the past, applying to the future whether you have aversion or attachment to it. So sensual desire for more of it, or ill will for less of it, or none of it. So there you see they all mix up together. And then 10 is ignorance. So really this is a lack of understanding that these attachments, unless you let go of them, will cause you to be reborn time and time again. So how do we let go of all of these? You don't need to think or remember about this list. You just need to understand it as I suppose 3 things really. With 3 things. Now you see, as I was saying earlier, I don't know if you can hear the cicada. This mic's quite good, but they're getting louder and louder. And the mosquitoes, the biting things, not ants up here yet, fortunately, but the mosquitoes, they're biting too. I'm quite good at ignoring mosquitoes in meditation. You get used to that. It's a little harder when you're doing something. When you're cleaning your bowl and they're biting your ankles. But I'm getting used to that. But when they're biting me now, I'm not sure if you can see any or not, then it is a little distracting. But I'm getting used to it. And this is quite good practice, because you say, well, it's just that. It's mosquitoes, they're biting you, it's just that. So try and keep your mind on what you're talking about. And what am I talking about? It boils down to desire. It's all desire. Now, if in this moment we have desire to have something or desire not to have something, that desire will be reborn, will take rebirth into the next moment. It flows. And this is what we need to practice letting go of. Now, when we sit in meditation and we experience these 5 hindrances, which are sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, tiredness, that is, restlessness and worry, and doubt, we can deal with them one by one. And we can practice, literally practice, how to let go of them. By saying, right, for this next 20 minutes or 40 minutes, I'm going to stop thinking about the ice cream or the pizza I want. I'm letting go of that now. And you may still crave it, you may still want it, but this kind of desire, this craving, with practice, will diminish, will reduce, and eventually it will be gone. Once you get into the 4th stage of samadhi, all of these 5 hindrances are abandoned, allowing you freedom, liberation from these fetters to move into the jhanas. 1st, 2nd, 3rd and 4th rupa jhanas, bodily jhanas, and then the further 4 mental jhanas. But essentially this state of absorption, states of absorption, where you have detached yourself from potential rebirth momentarily. Only once you can maintain that permanently have you attained arahantship, and you will not be reborn. You will enter into nibbana. And there are people practicing today, senior monastics around the world, whom have been practicing for many, many decades, whom are arahants, but go about ordinarily daily life, doing ordinary things, hearing about what's happening in the news, dealing with new monks coming along, dealing with problematical situations in monasteries, life, travelling, everything, as ordinary people. But in their minds, they're not attached to this stuff. They're not attached to their body anymore. They're not attached to their circumstances. But they can still enjoy all of those things. Or they can still not enjoy those things if they're getting very old and it's uncomfortable. But they will continue. Some may not even have to meditate so much anymore, because of course the purpose of meditation is to achieve this liberation. And once it is achieved, it isn't necessary. This is why you see many arahants towards the ends of their lives teaching so much out of compassion for mankind, their fellow beings. so that they can also experience this. So we're so fortunate in this day and age that we can listen to these advanced practitioners of many decades in the robes and benefit from their experiential understanding of this kind of liberation. Now, I think I'll kind of leave it there. I don't think I've explained things terribly well today, because some of the my experiential situation today has been a little bit distracting, but I'm hoping I've got the point across that rebirth is something you can appreciate in each and every day of your life as moving from moment to moment, as well as when we have dramatic life changes. But comparing that to when you die, do you really want to be reborn again? And go through all that we have to go through, which is always birth, aging, sickness and death. And that can happen over many decades, or it can happen very quickly. People die young. You may not even get sick, you may die in an accident, but there will be some, even a microsecond of pain, suffering, which is to all intents and purposes sickness, however short. So we have to face birth, aging, sickness and death to have physical rebirth. And the point of practice is to become liberated from that, to attain to Nibbana, which is freedom from rebirth, and therefore freedom from suffering. Now we can become free from suffering in this lifetime by simply knowing that. And how do we know that? We know it experientially through the practice of meditation, developing wisdom, so that our minds can not learn all of these lists and not learn the theory behind it and not really even be able to explain it, but appreciate and understand it and feel it in your hearts as being not in contradiction to nature, certainly not in contradiction to the truth of what we can actually see and experience. Because no one can argue that there's suffering and an end of suffering. Maybe you could argue there's an end of suffering, but you cannot argue that there is suffering. There is suffering. And knowing that is the best reason to want to be liberated, attain freedom from rebirth, because rebirth is just more suffering. And how do you do that? How do you become liberated and attain to freedom from rebirth? You practice sila, moral virtue. You practice samadhi, meditation, and panya, wisdom, or the development of wholesome mind states and the reduction of unwholesome mind states. And it's just that. That is the practice. And this way we become liberated and free from rebirth and able to let go. And it is about letting go to understand, to know. Just let go and know. So I'll leave it there for today and speak to you again soon. Thank you for watching. Oh.